The morning she tried to ban my service dog started like every other quiet day on Black Ridge Court, until HOA Karen came stomping down my driveway like she owned federal law. The air was calm, the flag on my porch still, and Max, my service dog, sat at attention beside me, eyes sharp, steady, silent. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now, and tell me if you've ever seen someone so entitled they thought rules bent for them. Because what happened next was the kind of arrogance you don't just witness, you remember. Karen's voice carried before her, Shadow did. "You can't have that animal in this neighborhood, Kevin. This is a pet-free community," she barked, clutching a clipboard like a badge of authority. She was in her late 50s, sun visor crooked, wearing the kind of smug smile that only appears when someone believes they're the law itself. The irony? She was about to break one. I didn't respond at first. I'd learned that silence unsettles people like her more than argument. I simply clipped Max's leash to his vest, the bright red one that reads, "Service dog, do not distract," and stood tall. The gesture was small, but in a world built on control, it was rebellion. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb, Kevin. You're violating Community Code Section 12, subparagraph B, no animals beyond fish, birds, or cats under 12 pounds. Her voice cracked like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd been waiting for a stage to perform on. She was shaking slightly, either from indignation or caffeine. I smiled just enough to make it sting. "That's adorable," I said, "except your bylaws stop where federal law begins." That sentence hit her like static. She blinked twice, processing it, then leaned forward as though volume could rewrite jurisdiction. "I don't care what you think your dog does. We've had complaints. People are allergic. You're disturbing the balance of the neighborhood." She emphasized balance like she was quoting scripture. Max, calm as ever, sat watching her with quiet intelligence, tail still, head tilted. He could read tension faster than any human. His training taught him to anchor me during panic or confrontation. But this wasn't fear. This was precision. I felt the pulse of my heartbeat slow instead of quicken, the same way it used to before briefings when I worked federal logistics for the Air Force. Calm under pressure wasn't optional. It was survival. Karen mistook that calm for weakness. They always do. She jabbed a finger at Max's vest. "Fake service animals are a growing problem. I know my rights, and I know yours end when someone's health is at risk." I took one slow breath and stepped down from the porch. "Do you?" I asked. "Because according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title III, Section 36(104), you're now violating federal accessibility law by attempting to restrict a trained and certified service animal on private property. That's not just a bylaw dispute, Karen. That's a federal crime." She froze. Her lips twitched, but no words came out. The silence between us thickened. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Doubt. But arrogance dies hard. She recovered fast, puffed out her chest, and sneered. "Oh, please, you're not the first person to throw fake legal jargon at me. I've been HOA president here for 12 years. I know what I'm talking about." "Then you know enough to stop talking," I said evenly, "because the next thing you say might be used in an ADA complaint." Her expression twisted like I'd slapped her with paperwork, which, in a way, I had. She opened her mouth again, then stopped when Max stood. Not growling, not barking, just standing, tall and still. He was trained to sense escalation, to position himself between me and confrontation, not aggressively but assertively. It was his way of saying, "I've got you." Karen backed up half a step. "That thing's dangerous," she snapped. "He's trained," I said. "More than anyone on your committee, I'd bet." Neighbors were starting to peek through blinds now, familiar faces behind glass, cautious and curious. They'd all seen Karen's crusades before, the petty wars over mailboxes, driveway paint shades, and wind chimes. But this was different. She wasn't policing aesthetics. She was trying to rewrite federal law to suit her allergies. "Listen carefully, Karen," I said, keeping my tone level but deliberate. "You're not just harassing me. You're harassing a disabled veteran with a certified medical service dog. Every word you say from here on out is potential evidence. You might want to take a walk before I start recording." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. Then, realizing she was losing the narrative, she pointed toward my yard. "This isn't over, Kevin. I'm calling the HOA board and animal control. We'll see what the law says when the sheriff shows up." "Perfect," I said. "Make sure they bring the ADA compliance officer, too. I'd love to educate them all at once." She stormed off, phone already in hand, muttering something about disrespectful tenants. I watched her retreat, that same leopard print visor bobbing like a flag of entitlement. Max sat beside me, steady, loyal. "That," I said quietly, "is the sound of someone about to learn the hard way what federal jurisdiction really means." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and the faint hum of voices from neighboring yards. I knew what came next: the escalation, the paperwork, the public drama. People like Karen don't back down when proven wrong. They double down until the law stops them. But this time, I wasn't the one at risk. She was. Because I wasn't just a homeowner with a dog. I was a federal certified handler with records, registrations, and an entire ADA compliance manual that backed every step Max and I took. And if she thought her HOA charter could outweigh Title 42 of the U.S. Code, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. As I watched her vanish around the corner, phone glued to her ear, I couldn't help but smile. The call she was about to make wouldn't go the way she thought. In a few hours, she'd be standing in front of a manager whose patience was built on protocol, not politics. And when that happened, the woman who thought she could ban a service dog would finally meet the one person in the neighborhood with the authority to silence her without raising a voice. And that's when she'd learn. You can bend HOA rules, but you can't bend federal law. People think calm under fire is something you're born with. They're wrong. It's something you earn. One sleepless night, one close call, one hard lesson at a time. Before I ever owned a home or stood on that porch staring down HOA Karen, I wore a uniform. For 12 years, I served in the U.S. Air Force, primarily as a logistics and K-9 operations officer. My specialty wasn't combat. It was order, the kind of order that holds when chaos hits. That's where I first met the kind of discipline you don't learn in meetings or manuals, the kind that lives in your bloodstream after enough years in federal service. That discipline is what saved me the day Karen decided my service dog didn't belong on my own property. Max wasn't just a dog I adopted. He was my partner, trained through the Department of Defense's Medical K-9 Assistance Program, a division that works alongside the VA to assign certified dogs to veterans with neurological and psychological disabilities. Max had been by my side for 5 years. He knew how to interrupt panic cycles, detect elevated heart rates, and ground me before flashbacks could take control. He wasn't a comfort animal. He was an extension of my nervous system, the kind that kept me functional. After I retired, I bought my property outside the HOA zone intentionally, a small cabin near the edge of the neighborhood, surrounded by pine and clean silence. It was far enough from their reach, or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that Karen had been slowly expanding her grip beyond the HOA's recorded boundary lines. She'd convinced herself that community spirit meant jurisdiction. It's a common delusion among people who've never had actual authority. They start mistaking paperwork for power. The first few months, I stayed out of the HOA's radar. I didn't attend meetings, didn't vote on their landscaping budgets or social events. I paid no dues because my deed exempted me. But it only took one Facebook post, a photo of me walking Max past the community park, for Karen to mark me as a problem. The next morning, I found a note taped to my mailbox. It was folded with bureaucratic neatness, stamped with the HOA seal, and written in Karen's signature passive-aggressive tone. Dear resident, animals not approved by the board are prohibited in shared spaces. Compliance is expected. Regards, HOA President. The arrogance made me laugh. So I did what I always do when someone misuses authority. I researched. By that afternoon, I'd pulled the full HOA charter from the county recorder's website. I read every page, cross-referenced it with Title 42 of the United States Code and ADA Section 12101. It was all right there, black and white. Federal accessibility law supersedes all state, local, and private regulations. Translation, her little policy held the same weight as a grocery receipt. But Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. She called a special compliance check the next week. I wasn't invited, but word travels fast in quiet neighborhoods. Her committee, a half-dozen retirees with clipboards and self-importance, marched up my drive like they were conducting a raid. They didn't knock. They just stood there, taking notes, whispering. I stepped outside with Max at my heel and said, "If you're here to enforce HOA rules, you're on the wrong property. Check your parcel maps before trespassing." Karen's smirk could have cracked glass. "We're expanding our oversight radius," she said. "Safety inspections don't stop at imaginary lines." Imaginary lines? I held up a copy of my property deed, laminated, notarized, dated. This imaginary line is a legal boundary filed with the county assessor's office. You cross it again, and it's criminal trespass. The color drained from her face for just a second, that flash of reality people get when the word criminal hits their ears. Then she recovered, pasted on that bureaucratic grin, and told me, "We'll see what our attorney says." I knew exactly what her attorney would say, because I'd already called the Department of Justice's ADA helpline earlier that week. The representative, a calm voice from Washington, told me something that stuck. No HOA, no landlord, no property manager can override ADA protections. That includes service animals in housing covered by or adjacent to associations. Document everything, Mr. Winters. So I did. Every note she sent, every comment on the neighborhood forum, every time her committee cars slowed in front of my house. Federal case files don't build themselves. They're built one screenshot at a time. But this wasn't just legal warfare. It was psychological. People like Karen thrive on intimidation. They rely on the assumption that you'll fold rather than fight. But my background taught me the opposite. When someone tries to weaponize policy against principle, you double down on both. At night, I'd sit on my porch with Max resting against my boots, listening to the crickets and thinking about the irony. After 2 deployments managing military logistics in chaos zones, I was home fighting a war over a dog and a line of text in a binder. Except this wasn't just a dog, and it wasn't just text. It was about sovereignty, about how far someone would go to preserve dignity when bureaucracy tries to strip it away. Karen began spreading rumors next. "He's using that dog as an excuse," she told one neighbor. "Probably a scam to get sympathy." She even called the county to verify his disability claim. The clerk, bless her patience, told her that attempting to access private medical data without authorization could itself be a felony under HIPAA. The next week, Karen doubled down again. She filed a formal complaint with the HOA board about community disruption and unregistered animals. She didn't realize that filing such a report against a federal ADA-protected individual is exactly how you end up in the DOJ's civil complaint system. so I made sure her report didn't go to waste. I forwarded it directly to the Civil Rights Division, attaching her emails, my documentation, and a short summary that ended with one sentence. This HOA is attempting to override federal accessibility law through intimidation and false community claims. They responded faster than I expected. Within 72 hours, I received an acknowledgement letter, formal DOJ letterhead, stamped and sealed. We have opened a preliminary inquiry regarding possible ADA interference under Title III. It was official now. She'd stepped into the ring with someone who played by bigger rules. That weekend, as the sun set behind the ridge, I caught Karen watching from her SUV down the street, pretending to check her phone. I walked Max slowly past her car, paused just long enough to meet her gaze, and said, "Still waiting to hear from your lawyer?" She rolled up the window and sped off, the gravel spitting behind her tires. Max looked up at me, head tilted, as if asking what the mission was now. I smiled. "Same as always, buddy. Hold the line." That night, as the cicadas droned and the cabin lights glowed amber through the blinds, I opened my laptop, organized every document, and began drafting the timeline. Incident log, correspondence, digital backups. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was precision. A slow burn of justice gathering fuel, because I knew what came next. HOA Karen wasn't the type to stop at a letter. She'd escalate. Calls, complaints, fake emergencies. That's what tyrants do when control slips. But what she didn't know was that I'd already prepared for every stage of her assault. And when she crossed the final line, she wouldn't just face me. She'd face the law itself, and the man who knew exactly how to use it. Every war has a chain of command, and HOA Karen's empire was no exception. She didn't just run her board. She built it like a fortress of favor, where power flowed through coffee clutches, bridge games, and whispered promises. She wasn't a president. She was a self-appointed queen, ruling over manicured lawns and terrified homeowners who'd rather repaint their fences twice a year than challenge her authority once. Karen's closest ally was Richard Tate, the HOA's self-titled legal advisor. He wasn't a licensed attorney, just a retired paralegal with a history of threatening small claims suits over mailbox heights. Then there was Joyce Miller, head of the Community Standards Committee, which was code for people Karen could manipulate. Joyce had a habit of quoting regulations that didn't exist, and she did it with the confidence of someone who believed tone equals truth. Their meetings weren't governance. They were gossip sessions with an agenda. I learned quickly that Karen's influence reached deeper than bylaws. She'd built her reputation on fear. Anyone who pushed back found themselves slapped with nuisance fines, landscaping violations, or safety reviews. She'd fined one elderly widow, Mrs. Green, for unsightly trash bins after her husband passed away, and she couldn't lift them alone. Another neighbor, a retired firefighter named Ellis, got cited for unauthorized exterior modifications because he replaced his porch light with a brighter bulb after a break-in. Karen didn't care about standards. She cared about submission. But what made her truly dangerous wasn't the rules. It was her network. Her cousin, Officer Dale Harper, worked as a deputy in the county sheriff's office. Her brother-in-law ran a small real estate agency that handled most of the home sales in the development. And she had a friend, a former city zoning planner, who occasionally consulted for the board on code enforcement. Together they formed a triangle of intimidation that kept everyone compliant. It wasn't an HOA, it was a miniature regime. I'd seen regimes before, ones that used laws as weapons, policies as camouflage. That was Karen's playbook, hide behind paperwork and procedure, until her targets either submitted or moved out. But this time, she'd picked the wrong opponent. After my ADA inquiry reached the Department of Justice, I started digging deeper. I pulled county tax records, business filings, even campaign contributions. What I found was a web of self-interest that stretched across every decision she'd ever made. Her cousin's name appeared on every property enforcement notice. Her brother-in-law's agency was listed as the buyer for 3 foreclosed properties, all homes that had once belonged to people Karen fined into bankruptcy. That was her grift. She weaponized community enforcement to create turnover, then scooped up the foreclosures at a discount through her family's business. And she'd gotten away with it for nearly a decade because no one had the backbone or the legal expertise to stop her. But I wasn't just any homeowner. I had the patience of a soldier and the precision of a federal auditor. I cataloged every conflict of interest, every public record that linked her to her inner circle. I built a dossier so airtight it could have been used in a congressional hearing. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't protecting her community. She was profiting off it. Her corruption wasn't just local, either. She had influence in the state HOA Council, an organization that lobbied for community rights reform. On paper, it sounded noble: local control, neighborhood autonomy. In practice, it was a mechanism to shield boards from accountability. Her name appeared on 3 petitions arguing against federal interference in community governance. The irony was enough to choke a lawyer. It was during one of her infamous town hall meetings that the mask slipped. The agenda was supposedly about enforcing new landscaping guidelines, but when I showed up, it turned into a tribunal. She stood at the front of the room like a dictator, addressing her subjects. "We must maintain community harmony," she said, "and that means compliance. No exceptions, no special treatment." Everyone knew she was talking about me. I waited until she paused for applause, then stood. The room went silent. "Harmony doesn't come from control," I said. "It comes from respect. And respect starts with obeying the law, especially federal law." Her smile tightened. "Kevin, no one is above the rules." "Except you," I replied, pulling a folded document from my jacket, the DOJ acknowledgement letter. "This says your HOA is under federal review for ADA interference. That's not a suggestion, Karen. That's an investigation." The gasp that rippled through the crowd was the kind you only hear when people realize their queen just lost her crown. Karen's eyes flashed with fury. "You're bluffing." I handed the letter to Joyce, who scanned it, eyes widening. "It's got a case number," she whispered. Karen snatched it from her hands. "This doesn't mean anything," she snapped, but her voice was cracking now, her authority bleeding out one syllable at a time. "It means everything," I said. "You've been using your title to intimidate disabled residents, manipulate property values, and weaponize policy for personal gain. That stops now." The room broke into murmurs, some supportive, some nervous. Karen, desperate to regain control, pointed at me. "You're banned from this meeting. You're not even a dues-paying member." "Exactly," I said, "and yet here I am holding the one piece of paper that can shut you down." I turned and walked out, leaving the murmurs to ferment into whispers, then rumors, then doubt. Karen could silence individuals, but she couldn't silence a community once it smelled blood in the water. That night, I knew she'd retaliate. Bullies like her always do. But this time, her power was cracked. The next morning, 3 homeowners emailed me privately, thanking me for standing up to her. One of them, Ellis, the retired firefighter, attached a PDF of his old inspection report, showing how Karen had doctored the photos to make his porch look non-compliant. Another neighbor sent screenshots of Karen bragging about getting rid of the troublemakers to her board group chat. It was the beginning of her undoing. By the end of that week, I'd compiled a 47-page evidence file: HOA board corruption, ADA violations, fraudulent enforcement actions, and personal profiteering. It was enough to bury her in administrative law hearings for years. But my goal wasn't revenge, it was exposure. Bullies like Karen thrive in shadows. I wanted her collapse to happen in daylight, with witnesses, with accountability. So I sent the file to 3 places: the DOJ investigator assigned to my case, the county ethics board, and the local paper's investigative desk. It wasn't just about what she did to me. It was about everyone she'd hurt, everyone she'd silenced. Karen wanted to play authority. I was about to show her what real authority looked like. That night, as Max lay at my feet, I poured myself a cup of coffee and reread the file one more time. Every photo, every timestamp, every email was a nail in the coffin of her little empire. She thought she was the law, but the law was already on its way. You don't fight people like HOA Karen with emotion. You fight them with evidence. And not the kind that lives in rumors or angry Facebook comments, the kind that can stand on a courtroom projector with chain of custody timestamps and legal citations sharp enough to cut through denial. That's what this phase was about. Turning outrage into documentation. Turning harassment into prosecution. When the Department of Justice confirmed their preliminary inquiry, I didn't celebrate, I strategized. Every investigation starts with burden of proof, and I knew exactly where hers would crack first: the paper trail. Karen's empire ran on fake authority, but fake authority leaves real fingerprints. I started with the HOA's own records. They weren't careful. They never are. The HOA kept its meeting minutes on a shared Google Drive that had been public view for months. Within 30 minutes, I had downloaded every file from the past 5 years: bylaws, amendment drafts, enforcement letters, complaint logs. What I found inside was a civil rights lawyer's dream. There were multiple instances of targeted enforcement, specifically naming homeowners with disabilities. One document titled Animal Control Coordination Memo outlined strategies to manage animal exemptions under ADA loopholes. Another listed my property by address, marked with the word monitor. That was the smoking gun. The memo referenced consultation with county legal contact, which I traced to Karen's cousin, Deputy Dale Harper. I called the Sheriff's Department's Internal Affairs line, posing no bluff. "This is Kevin Winters. I need to report potential misuse of county authority in a civil ADA matter." They took the statement seriously. Harper was placed on administrative review within 48 hours. The domino effect had begun. Next came financial discovery. I traced property acquisitions through the county recorder's system, matching dates of foreclosures to Karen's HOA violation reports. She'd filed citations against homes within 60 days of every one of those properties being listed for sale, and each ended up bought through her brother-in-law's agency. Pattern evidence. I cataloged it all in a spreadsheet: date, address, violation, sale price, buyer. 32 entries in total. A perfect digital fingerprint of corruption. But what elevated this from neighborhood scandal to federal case was the ADA overlay. Under Title III, interfering with or retaliating against the exercise of disability rights is punishable by civil penalties of up to $75,000 for a first violation and $150,000 for each subsequent one. I wasn't after money, I was after precedent, the kind that makes every future HOA board think twice before weaponizing rules against someone's rights. That's when I called in backup. My old contact from the Air Force, Captain Diane Rhodes, now worked as an investigator with the Federal Housing Administration's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Division. I sent her a condensed brief. Not gossip, not emotion, just facts. She called within an hour. "Kevin, I'm forwarding this to the regional field office," she said. "This isn't just ADA, it's fair housing, potentially wire fraud if they used HOA funds to harass homeowners electronically." Her tone was surgical, precise, the sound of real authority. Meanwhile, Karen still thought this was neighborhood drama. She had no idea the emails she sent about cleaning up problem residents were already part of a federal evidence file. She kept doubling down. That week, she issued me a cease and desist letter, hand-signed, printed on HOA letterhead, citing imaginary statutes about community harmony. It was laughable, but I didn't laugh. I certified it, logged it, and added it to the chain of harassment. Each step tightened the noose. I filed a Freedom of Information request with the County Zoning Department for all complaints filed by the HOA in the past 5 years. Out of 146 records, 92 were filed personally by Karen. 87 of those were against single homeowners. Of those, 6 involved service or emotional support animals. The ratio alone was enough to prove targeting. While the data piled up, I built a timeline. Day 1, HOA complaint delivered. Day 3, property inspection initiated by her cousin's deputy team. Day 10, safety violation letter sent. Day 30, property listed for sale. Day 45, purchased by affiliate of Karen's family. It wasn't a coincidence. It was racketeering hidden under the HOA banner. But evidence means nothing without narrative. So I wrote the report like an after-action log, each page formatted in military precision. I labeled sections: background, incident summary, pattern analysis, legal references, supporting documents. By the time I was done, it read like a federal case file because that's exactly what it was becoming. I submitted everything through the DOJ's secure portal and received confirmation of upload. Case materials received and logged for review under ADA Civil Rights Docket 2025-1713. The next 48 hours were silence. Too silent. And in that silence, Karen made her biggest mistake. Late Thursday evening, I caught the flash of headlights creeping past my cabin, a vehicle idling where the HOA's jurisdiction ended. I watched through the blinds as 2 silhouettes emerged, one holding a flashlight, the other holding a phone. They started taking photos of my yard, of Max. My dog didn't bark. He simply rose, placed himself between me and the window, and waited. I grabbed my camera, recorded everything. Their car? A white crossover registered to the HOA's Community Standards Committee. The next morning, I emailed the footage directly to the DOJ investigator, copying the county sheriff's internal affairs and FHA field office. No commentary, just the subject line. Ongoing aid harassment, surveillance attempt captured 2213 hours. By noon, I had a reply from Investigator Rhodes herself. We have opened formal proceedings. Do not engage further with any HOA representatives. They are now under federal observation. For the first time in months, I exhaled. But Karen wasn't wired to understand defeat. Within 2 days, she called a special emergency meeting. Her announcement letter accused me of endangering the community by keeping a volatile animal, and warned residents about federal agitators manipulating neighborhood unity. It was pure panic disguised as patriotism, the kind of rhetoric you use when you feel power slipping through your fingers. I didn't attend. Instead, I watched the live stream that one of the younger board members secretly broadcast online. The footage showed Karen pacing at the front of the HOA clubhouse, her clipboard trembling, her voice sharp with desperation. "They're investigating us because of him," she shouted, slamming her palm on the table. "This is harassment! I won't let Washington bureaucrats tell us how to run our neighborhood." Someone in the crowd muttered, "Didn't you bring them here yourself?" The laughter that followed cut deeper than any lawsuit could. That's when the HOA manager, her own hand-picked treasurer, Dennis Cole, spoke up, his tone dry and professional. "Karen, we just got a notice from the DOJ too. They're requesting financial disclosures. They asked for copies of our enforcement expenses, attorney retainers, and property transfer records." The color drained from her face. "Tell me you didn't use association funds for personal matters," he said quietly. Her silence answered for her. By nightfall, the news broke. Federal investigation launched into Black Ridge HOA for ADA interference and financial misconduct. It wasn't national yet, but it was spreading fast through local outlets and social media. Residents who'd been too scared to speak were suddenly messaging me, sharing stories, forwarding emails, offering testimony. And through it all, Max stayed calm. Every ping of a new message, every flash of light outside, he stayed right there beside me. Still, steady, watchful. I realized he wasn't just my service dog. He was my anchor in the storm Karen had unleashed. The following week, the DOJ scheduled on-site interviews. They sent 2 investigators, one from the Civil Rights Division, one from Housing and Urban Development. Their badges were quiet, their questions methodical. They didn't need drama. They needed truth. I gave them everything: digital logs, emails, HOA letters, even the time-stamped video of the inspection attempt. When they finished, the senior investigator closed her binder, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Mr. Winters, this case has legs. You did everything right. Now let us handle the rest." Outside, the air felt lighter, cleaner, as if the ridge itself was exhaling with me. But the discovery phase didn't end there. It evolved. Because when bullies lose power, they panic. And when they panic, they make mistakes. Big ones. 2 nights later, Karen sent a blast email to the entire HOA mailing list, claiming the federal investigators were actors hired by me to intimidate her. Within an hour, one of the recipients forwarded it straight to the DOJ inbox. By morning, she'd violated 2 separate federal statutes: witness intimidation and obstruction of investigation. The next day, an unmarked SUV pulled up to her house. 2 agents in suits walked to her door. One carried a file, the other a recorder. The neighborhood watched through curtains as the Queen of Black Ridge was interviewed on her own porch, under oath, on camera. I didn't celebrate. I just stood at my window with Max beside me, the hum of justice finally louder than her voice had ever been. By the end of that month, the HOA board was subpoenaed for financial records. The bank froze their accounts pending audit. Karen's allies resigned one by one, claiming ignorance. But ignorance doesn't erase signatures. Her initials were everywhere: every expense authorization, every memo header, every fraudulent inspection she'd signed. It was beautiful in its inevitability, and yet I stayed quiet. The soldier in me knew better than to gloat before the mission was over. Justice isn't about noise, it's about precision. The official DOJ case summary arrived 2 weeks later. Title: United States versus Black Ridge Estates Homeowners Association et al. Allegations, ADA interference, retaliatory harassment, and misuse of community funds. Hearing scheduled in federal court. I looked at the printed seal, the eagle embossed at the top of the page, and felt something I hadn't felt since active duty: closure. But I also knew this was just the beginning, because the confrontation wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't someone who accepted consequence quietly. And when the walls of power start collapsing, even the loudest tyrants try one last scream before the silence swallows them whole. And that scream was coming. When pressure builds, truth doesn't reveal itself quietly. It detonates. The morning it all came to a head, the ridge was cloaked in mist, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm breaks. Max sat by the porch steps, posture alert but calm, watching as a county vehicle rolled up the hill. I already knew who was inside. Karen didn't take defeat with dignity. When people like her start to lose power, they try to rewrite the ending. She had filed a final complaint with the county, claiming that my dog posed a public safety threat. The report was written like a manifesto, dramatic, self-righteous, and packed with legal half-truths she'd copied from internet forums. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to humiliate me publicly, to make her downfall look like martyrdom. But this time, she'd dragged the wrong agency into her mess. A white county truck parked at the base of my drive, and out stepped a man in a navy windbreaker. His badge caught the morning light. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. Not county code enforcement. Not the HOA's puppet. Federal authority, calm and unshakable. Karen's SUV screeched to a halt right behind him. She stepped out, all fake confidence and nervous energy, armed with her clipboard like it was a weapon. "Mr. Winters," she shouted before the agent could even introduce himself. "I demand this matter be resolved immediately. He's harboring an unlicensed animal that's been aggressive toward residents. I have documentation." She waved her papers as though sheer motion could create legitimacy. The agent didn't flinch. He waited until she stopped talking, then turned to me. "Mr. Winters, we're here as part of the ongoing ADA inquiry. You filed your materials accurately. Ms. Dunkirk has been advised of her rights and obligations under federal law. We're here to confirm compliance." I nodded once. "Everything's documented. You're welcome to inspect the area. My service dog certifications are current and verified." Karen's eyes widened, confused by his tone. "Wait, what?" she asked, stepping closer. "You're not here about my report?" He met her gaze with the patience of a man who'd handled 100 Karens before. "Ma'am, we are here because of your report." He pulled out a folder, opened it, and handed her a paper. "This is a formal warning from the United States Department of Justice. You are being cited for potential interference in a federally protected disability accommodation." The sound that came from her wasn't anger. It was disbelief. She looked down at the letter, lips moving silently as she read. The words, "criminal penalties" and "civil enforcement" must have struck her like bullets. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "I was protecting my community. He's the problem." The agent didn't raise his voice. "Ms. Dunkirk, you used your position to target and intimidate a disabled veteran. You filed false reports, manipulated local law enforcement, and attempted to enforce regulations that do not apply to private property. That's not protection. That's harassment." Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the scene. The sight of their once invincible HOA president being read her rights in broad daylight. Max sat still at my side, his red vest shining like a badge of his own. For the first time, Karen seemed small. Her posture sagged, her words faltering as the weight of consequence settled in. "You can't do this to me," she said, voice trembling. "I'm the HOA president." The agent closed his folder. "You were," he said, "effective immediately. You are suspended from all duties pending outcome of federal investigation. Any attempt to contact residents, file new citations, or destroy records will be considered obstruction." The quiet that followed wasn't silence. It was justice, the kind that hums through the air like static before lightning strikes. But Karen wasn't finished. People like her never accept a clean defeat. 2 days later, she tried to hold an emergency meeting to rally what was left of her supporters. The clubhouse lights burned late into the evening. From my porch, I could see the silhouettes pacing behind the windows. Max sat beside me, his head on my knee, listening to the faint echo of voices rising in the distance. She was desperate, grasping at any illusion of power left. By morning, flyers appeared in mailboxes across the neighborhood, poorly printed, full of typos, stamped with the HOA logo she no longer had the right to use. They accused me of federal manipulation, of staging evidence, of endangering the community through misinformation. I didn't tear them down. I didn't have to. Every homeowner who read them saw what they really were, the frantic last gasps of someone drowning in her own lies. That afternoon, the media showed up. A small local news crew parked near the gate, drawn by whispers of the HOA under federal review. Karen tried to intercept them first, striding up with her usual arrogance, spinning her version of the story. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said. "I've always acted in the best interest of our residents. This man is exploiting federal law to avoid community standards." The reporter, a young woman with the calm focus of someone who could smell deceit, asked one simple question. "Ma'am, are you aware that interfering with a service animal violates the Americans with Disabilities Act?" Karen Oy blinked. The cameras caught every second of her confusion, every flicker of panic. "That's not what this is about," she said, voice quivering. "He's not disabled. He's dramatic." The reporter tilted her head. "You do realize that's a federal crime to say on camera, right?" And just like that, Karen's empire collapsed in real time. The segment aired that night, and within hours, the HOA's social media exploded. Residents who had once whispered their frustrations finally spoke up. Stories poured in. People fined for holiday decorations, threatened over minor landscaping, humiliated at meetings. The narrative had shifted completely. The bully had become the villain, and the veteran with the service dog had become the symbol of resistance. But the confrontation wasn't done. There was one last scene to play out: the HOA board's dissolution hearing. It was held at the county courthouse, a small room that smelled like old wood and justice. Karen sat at the defense table, pale, hands trembling, eyes darting between her attorney and the federal investigator sitting opposite. I sat quietly in the back, Max at my feet, his head resting on my boot, steady as ever. The judge entered, a woman with a tone that could slice through arrogance like a blade through paper. "We are here today regarding the Department of Justice versus Black Ridge Estates HOA, case number 2025-17-3. She looked down her glasses. "Ms. Dunkirk, it appears your organization has violated multiple sections of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and state civil conduct statutes." Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. "I've read the evidence. Don't waste my time." Then the investigator from DOJ stood. "Your Honor, we've confirmed a pattern of retaliatory behavior against disabled residents, misuse of HOA funds, and deliberate attempts to obstruct a federal inquiry. The complainant, Mr. Winters, acted within every legal right available to him. We recommend full dissolution of the current HOA board, permanent removal of Ms. Dunkirk from leadership, and financial restitution to all affected residents." The judge nodded. "Approved." Her gavel came down with a single, decisive crack. "Ms. Dunkirk, you are hereby barred from serving in any community leadership position for life. Your HOA is dissolved effective immediately. You may consider this your final notice." Karen stood, shaking. "You can't just erase everything I built," she cried. The judge looked at her without sympathy. "You didn't build a community. You built a system of fear, and fear has no place under the law." As she was escorted out, the courtroom doors swung open to a soft winter breeze, sunlight cutting across the floor like redemption itself. I stood slowly, gave a respectful nod to the judge, and walked out with Max beside me. For once, the ridge felt silent, not the heavy silence of conflict, but the peaceful kind that comes after justice has spoken. Outside, a few neighbors waited. Mrs. Green, the widow Karen had once fined for her trash bins, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Ellis, the retired firefighter, clapped my shoulder. "Took the right man to bring her down." I just smiled. "Took all of us." Max nudged my leg softly, and I crouched to scratch behind his ears. "We did it, buddy," I said quietly. "We held the line." And as I looked back toward the courthouse steps, where Karen's shadow had once loomed over everyone, I realized the truth. This was never about one woman's arrogance. It was about every homeowner, every veteran, Every person who's ever been told their rights were negotiable. It was about standing firm when the world insists you kneel. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. The war was over. The bully had fallen. And the law, the same law she'd tried to twist, had finally found its voice. When the dust settled after the courtroom ruling, most people thought the fight was over. They didn't understand how deep HOA Karen's corruption went, or how many victims had been silenced under her self-made empire. But I wasn't done. Justice doesn't stop at exposure. It finishes with accountability. And I intended to make sure that every fraudulent dollar she'd taken, every unlawful citation she'd issued, and every homeowner she'd bullied found their restitution. The week after the judgment, federal auditors moved in. They didn't arrive with noise or flashing lights. They came with laptops, scanners, and quiet efficiency. They combed through every HOA account, transaction, and email record. Within days, they confirmed what I'd already discovered: misappropriation of funds, double billing, fake contractor invoices. Karen had treated HOA dues like her personal piggy bank. Luxury weekend trips labeled as community wellness retreats, restaurant dinners coded as board strategy meetings, and a brand new patio renovation she charged as landscaping maintenance. Every file they opened was another nail in her financial coffin. I watched from a distance, not out of spite, but closure. For the first time, her network wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling. Her so-called allies had turned state's evidence to protect themselves. Richard Tate, her paralegal-in-chief, surrendered a USB drive full of correspondence proving she'd fabricated citations. Joyce Miller handed over minutes showing Karen had altered voting results on property violations. Even her brother-in-law from the real estate agency confessed that Karen pressured him into buying foreclosed homes at manipulated prices. One by one, they flipped, each trying to save themselves from the fallout she'd engineered. The DOJ team called me in for a debrief. It was held at the Federal Annex building downtown, a place that smelled of paper, coffee, and long hours. Investigator Rhodes greeted me at the door, her tone steady and professional. "Kevin, you did more than file a complaint," she said. "You exposed a regional pattern of abuse. Black Ridge isn't the only HOA under review now. You just set a precedent." The words landed heavier than I expected. I'd started this fight for Max and me, for the right to live without harassment. But it had grown into something larger. A test case that would echo across every neighborhood where power-hungry boards thought they could act above the law. Rhodes handed me a copy of the civil judgment paperwork. As part of restitution, the HOA's insurance fund will be used to compensate affected residents. You're entitled to a share for damages and emotional distress, but you can also redirect it to veterans organizations if you choose. I nodded. "Send mine to the Service Dog Training Initiative. They saved my life before this even began." Her smile was small, but genuine. "Consider it done." Outside, the news was spreading fast. Local stations covered the story daily, framing it as federal takedown of HOA corruption. The footage from Karen's confrontation at my property replayed on loop. The moment she was served her federal warning, her expression frozen in disbelief. Social media dubbed her HOA Karen, the Queen of Consequences. Memes flooded timelines, commentary poured in, and the public response turned the case into a cautionary tale. But behind the viral spectacle, something real was changing. Homeowners from across the state began filing similar complaints, people who'd been fined, threatened, or bullied under false pretenses. My inbox filled with hundreds of messages, veterans and civilians alike thanking me for standing up when they couldn't. I never saw myself as a hero. But in a world where silence feeds corruption, sometimes just refusing to bow is enough to start a revolution. Meanwhile, Karen's downfall went from humiliating to absolute. Federal restitution orders required her to repay over $180,000 in diverted funds. The state revoked her notary license. And the Attorney General's office announced pending charges for fraud, harassment, and obstruction. Her once pristine Lexus was repossessed, her house listed for auction, and her name scrubbed from the HOA registry she'd ruled for over a decade. I saw her once more, purely by accident. I was at the county office signing a property release form when she walked out of the elevator, thinner, paler, stripped of her usual armor of arrogance. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead she whispered, "You ruined my life." I looked her in the eye and said, "No, Karen. You did that the moment you decided someone's disability was your inconvenience." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, the echo of her heels fading like the last note of a bad song. After that, I focused on rebuilding peace in the neighborhood. Without Karen, the ridge felt alive again. Neighbors waved instead of whispering. Mrs. Green started planting flowers along her walkway, the same ones Karen once called non-compliant. Ellis volunteered to repaint the community signs for free. Even the kids who used to hide their bikes now rode freely down the streets, laughter replacing tension. But for me, the closure wasn't in their smiles. It was in the silence that followed. No more notes on my door. No more complaints. No more watching my back every time I walked Max down the trail. Just quiet. Real, earned quiet. A few weeks later, the DOJ invited me to a conference in D.C., a panel on veteran accessibility and housing law reform. I didn't hesitate. On stage, I spoke about what happened not as a victim, but as a lesson. Authority without accountability is corruption, I said, and the law only works when someone has the courage to invoke it. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, respectful, the kind of sound that means people heard you, not just listened. When I returned home, there was a letter waiting for me. It was from the DOJ, formally acknowledging the case's impact. It read, "Your cooperation and persistence have directly contributed to expanding ADA enforcement guidelines for residential associations. The department thanks you for your service, both past and present." I folded it carefully and placed it in a frame next to Max's certification. He deserved half that credit. Without him, I might never have had the strength to endure the sleepless nights, the constant tension, the battle of wills against a woman who mistook fear for power. Max had been my compass through it all, leading me to justice with quiet loyalty. One evening, as the sun set over the ridge, the air soft with summer warmth, I took Max for a walk along the old HOA boundary. The private property signs were gone, replaced with new plaques that read, "Community maintained, all residents welcome." I paused, letting the moment sink in. The same paths Karen once patrolled for control were now open, peaceful, free. It struck me then that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of peace returning after tyranny fades. Sometimes it's a man and his dog walking in silence, knowing that the system that once failed him now works because he made it. Before heading home, I looked back at the horizon and whispered, "We did good, buddy." Max tilted his head, eyes bright in the fading light, tail giving a single, calm wag. For him, it wasn't victory. It was just another mission complete. And for me, it was the reminder I needed. You can strip a man of peace, of comfort, even of reputation, but you can't strip him of truth. And when truth stands beside you on 4 legs, wearing a red vest that reads, "Service Dog," do not distract. Even the loudest tyrant in the world eventually falls silent. The world didn't end with a bang for HOA Karen. It ended with a quiet headline and a single sentence at the bottom of a newspaper article. Former HOA president found guilty of fraud, ordered to pay restitution. That was it. No bold letters, no spotlight. Just the faint echo of accountability finally catching up to her. For someone who once ruled an entire neighborhood through fear, her end was small. Fittingly small. By the time the verdict came, the Ridge had changed completely. The old HOA office, the one that used to send out threat letters about fence paint and garden gnomes, was empty. The sign on the door read, "Under Federal Administration," but everyone in town knew what that really meant. It was over. The empire she built on control, manipulation, and paperwork had been dismantled brick by brick. Max and I walked the neighborhood that morning. The air was crisp, sunlight cutting across the asphalt like gold. For the first time in years, there were kids laughing by the park again. Flags fluttered freely without anyone measuring their height. Even the sound of lawn mowers felt peaceful instead of tense. The people who had once avoided eye contact now waved, not just because of what I'd done, but because fear had finally left the Ridge. One neighbor, Ellis, the retired firefighter, was repainting the community bulletin board. He looked up as I passed. "Heard she's moving," he said, brushing a streak of red paint across the top corner. I nodded. "She won't last long in the next place either. The law has a way of following people like her." He laughed. "Guess you gave her the lesson none of us could." "Not me," I said, glancing down at Max. "We did." Max wagged his tail once, like he understood every word. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Inside was a simple document, a notice of case closure and final restitution certification. It confirmed what I already knew. The Black Ridge HOA no longer existed. All homeowners' liens were voided, fines rescinded, and those affected were to receive proportional compensation from the recovered funds. For a moment, I just stared at it. Not out of pride, out of relief. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was vindication. Proof that the law, when wielded correctly, could still protect the people it was meant to serve. I placed the letter in a file next to my service records and Max's certifications. 3 documents that told the story of 3 wars, one fought overseas, one fought within, and one fought here, on quiet American soil, against arrogance dressed as authority. That weekend, the community organized a small barbecue. It wasn't official. No board, no permissions, no agenda. Just neighbors showing up with folding chairs and paper plates. Mrs. Green brought her famous lemon bars. Ellis grilled burgers. Someone set up speakers, and music floated through the evening air like freedom. Halfway through, a man from the County walked up to me. He was new, the interim property administrator overseeing the transition after the HOA's collapse. "Mr. Winters," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I wanted to thank you personally. What you did here, it set an example. You didn't just win a case, you changed policy, statewide." I raised an eyebrow. "Policy?" He nodded. "The DOJ used your case to draft new oversight procedures for homeowner associations dealing with ADA compliance. There's talk of calling it the Winters provision. It requires every HOA in the state to undergo disability rights training and certify all enforcement actions through a compliance review." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. All I could think about was that first morning, standing on my porch, Max beside me, while Karen screamed about rules she didn't understand. It had started as survival, and now it had become reform. "Guess that's one way to make sure she didn't scream for nothing," I said quietly. He smiled. "Sometimes the loudest people teach the best lessons." When he left, I sat at the picnic table with Max under the glow of the string lights. The laughter around me was soft and easy, and for once, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder. I reached down, running my hand across Max's fur. "We did it," I whispered. "Not just for us, for everyone." The stars came out early that night. Somewhere in the distance, a plane passed overhead. A sound that once triggered unease now brought comfort. It reminded me that peace doesn't come from escaping conflict. It comes from conquering it. Before heading home, I stood one last time by the park gate, the same one where Karen once stopped me to argue about community policy. The new sign gleamed beneath the lamplight. Federal Accessibility Compliant Zone. Service animals welcome. I smiled. That single line meant more than any courtroom victory ever could. As I walked home, Max trotted ahead, his red vest catching the light with every step. The night air was cool, calm, and finally free. I thought about how full circle it had all come, from being told I didn't belong to ensuring no one would ever hear those words again on this ridge. That was justice. Real, lasting justice. When we reached the porch, I paused and looked out across the quiet street. The war was over. The noise, the fear, the threats, all gone. What remained was peace, earned through persistence, patience, and law. Max sat beside me, head tilted, eyes soft. I knelt beside him and said, "You were the hero all along." He licked my hand once, then lay down with a sigh, as if finally allowing himself to rest. And as I looked at him there, beneath the soft glow of the porch light, I realized the truth that every battle eventually teaches you. Victory isn't always loud, and justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits quietly beside you, breathing evenly, content that the fight is finally over. That's when I knew it was time to close the file, both literally and in my heart. Because HOA Karen was gone, her reign was finished, and Black Ridge Ridge was finally free. And as long as Max was still by my side, I didn't need applause or headlines. I had peace, and that was the one victory no one could ever take away.